Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to demystify a term that is absolutely changing how businesses think about success: double materiality. Now, it might sound a little complex, but trust me, we're going to break it all down.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll get a handle on what material even means in the business world. Then, we'll see how that idea is evolving. After that, we'll define double materiality itself, look at how companies actually put it into practice, and finally wrap up with why this whole shift is such a big deal.
All right, let's dive right in. See, to really get double materiality, you've got to start with the concept that businesses have been using for decades: just plain old traditional materiality.
Historically, when a company talked about something being material, they were really just talking about money. The basic idea was, if this piece of info could make an investor buy or sell our stock, well, then it's material. It was all about what could sway financial decisions.
So yeah, the core question was always about the bottom line. It's what we call an outside-in view. It's all about how things out in the world, like, say, climate change or new government rules, might create financial risks or even opportunities for the company.
But what if that's only half the story? This is where things start to get really interesting, and the definition of what matters begins to expand into a much, much bigger picture.
This right here, this question is the absolute heart of the matter. That traditional view, it only looks in one direction. It totally ignores the company's own footprint, its real-world impacts on people and on the planet. And realizing that, well, that's what's driving this huge shift we're seeing.
And that brings us to the key difference. Think of single materiality as that one-way street we just talked about, the world's impact on the company's wallet. Double materiality, on the other hand, turns it into a two-way street. It adds that second crucial perspective, the company's impact back on the world. So what exactly is this new two-sided approach? Let's break down the two perspectives that come together to form the double in double materiality. This visual illustrates it perfectly. You can picture it like a Venn diagram, right? You've got these two overlapping circles of what's considered material. One is purely financial, and the other is all about impact. Now, that first perspective is called impact materiality. This is all about the company's effect on the outside world. We're talking about things like, how much pollution is it creating? How are its workers being treated? Are its products actually good for people? And the second perspective? Well, that's the one we started with, financial materiality. This is that classic, traditional view focusing on how sustainability issues could create risks or opportunities that hit the company's stock price or its ability to get a loan.
A really easy way to remember this is to think inside out versus outside in. Impact materiality is that inside-out view, how the company affects the world. And financial materiality is the outside-in view, how the world affects the company. And when you put them together, that's when you finally get the full picture.
Okay, so this all sounds good in theory, but how does a company actually figure all this stuff out? Well, it's not just a philosophical exercise. There's a really structured process they follow to put this into practice. I know this chart might look a little complicated at first, but the core idea is actually pretty straightforward. It's a process called a double materiality assessment. You can think of it like a journey where a company starts by understanding its place in the world, identifies all its potential impacts, figures out which ones are most important, and then finally reports on them. It really boils down to four key stages. First up, they have to understand their business, who they work with, who they affect. Second, they identify a big, long list of all the potential impacts, risks, and opportunities. Third, they assess that list to figure out what's actually significant. And finally, they report back on everything they found. So, during that assessment step, how do they sort through that massive list? Well, companies often use a tool that looks something like this, a materiality matrix. It's a really powerful way to plot out which issues are the most severe versus how likely they are to happen. It helps separate what's truly critical from all the other noise. But, and this is a really crucial detail, when you're talking about potential harm to people, the rules change. An issue is considered important based on how severe the harm could be, even if it's super unlikely to ever happen. Basically, protecting people always comes first. Okay, so we've defined the concept, we've walked through the process, but let's get to the big question. Why should we actually care about this shift? What does all this mean in the real world?
Well, this shift is a really big deal because it fundamentally redefines what it means for a business to be successful. It forces companies to give us a much more honest and complete picture of their performance.
It holds them accountable not just for their profits, but for their actual impact on the world. It's about finally recognizing that a truly healthy business can only exist on a healthy planet and in a healthy society. And make no mistake, this isn't some fringe idea. It's rapidly becoming a global standard, especially in places like Europe. So what this quote is really saying is that we need to get everybody on the same page. We need one clear, consistent set of rules for how all companies everywhere report on their full impact.
Ultimately, what double materiality shows us is that a company's success and our collective well-being, they're really just two sides of the same coin. And as that idea becomes more and more mainstream, it leaves us with a really interesting question for the future. What else are we going to decide is truly material?